Hi, this is Andrew Smith, instructor at Ferris State University and run of art by Smitty.com. This is going to be part 7 in my Dota 2 workshop tutorial series. We're going to be taking our weapon that we're creating, the light blade, and unwrapping it and performing the UV layout of this low poly game ready mesh. So with that being said, we'll go into 3ds Max. In the last part, we re-topoed this guy, made sure it was symmetrical, and that we were hitting our tri-limit. For this weapon, tri-limit would be 300, so since I modeled half of the weapon, the tri-limit should be for half of it 175, and I'm at 173 right now, so I'm good to go. At this point, I need to make sure that my pivot point here, if I go to top view and hit G for grid, making sure that that's at 0, 0, 0. So when I'm going to actually come over here and use the symmetry modifier, flip it around the Y, but flip it. Making sure that it's obviously symmetrical, because I'm going to unwrap half of it and I want the other half to have the same texture space. So before I commit to that symmetry, I need to come in here and select this, and I'm not going to be unwrapping it in Max. I'm actually going to be unwrapping it in a program called Roadkill, which is free to download and use. So we'll call this lightblade_LP. I'm going to be exporting this out as an OBJ file. I don't need texture coordinates nor materials. Everything else is fine. Hit done. And it's placed it on my desktop now. I'm going to open up Roadkill, and I'll just go ahead and say run. At this point, once I'm inside of Roadkill, I need to go up here to File, Load. Go to my desktop and go find this light blade. There we are. It's got the same controls as Maya. I love this navigation control system better than Max's. Anyway, first thing I'm going to do is go to Edge Mode Select, so I can select all of my edges, and just hit W for weld. Next thing I need to do is go to Switches, Single Select, Switches, don't select back faces. I probably won't really need to, since this has no back faces. Selecting an edge and then holding T will have your last line shown in yellow, and then if you click another edge, it'll draw the shortest distance to that edge. So essentially, I'm just kind of coming around here, and I want to cut this weapon in half, because I'm essentially just going to be, like I've been saying, texturing half of the weapon. Weapons are pretty darn easy to unwrap because of this. At least a weapon that looks like this. There we are. Now all I need to do is hit C for cut, and it's going to lay it out there perfectly for me. I can come in here and say textures show stretch. That way it's going to show me any of the stretching that I'm getting or shrinking. A little bit of red's not going to kill us, and that's going to be absolutely fine for this. So it's a near perfect unwrap. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close. I like what I'm getting here in the light blade in UV space. I'm happy with everything except for this little dent. Essentially what I want to do is when I'm painting in Photoshop, I want to be able to just click here once and then click to here and hold shift and have it draw a straight line when I'm hand painting, because Dota 2's art style is very hand painterly. So I'm going to edit these UVs a little bit inside of Max. I just use Roadkill to kind of pelt map my object. We could have used pelt mapping in Max, but there's just a few more buttons to click, and I work better like this. So I'm just going to hit File, Save. Now I can close Roadkill. Coming into Max, I'll delete my original mesh and my reference. I don't need that anymore. Come in here and say File, Import. Go to my desktop, grab that low poly object, import as editable poly, single mesh, and that's pretty much all we need to say. Import. Now if you were to throw an unwrap modifier on this guy, you'll see that it preserved all of the unwraps that we had in Roadkill. Hit Open UV Editor. And from here, I want to make sure that I'm doing a little bit of tweaking. I'm going to say show my checker pattern in the viewport, and depending on what display driver you're using, you should see the checker pattern. I'll only see it now if I hit render really quickly, just because I'm using Max's new viewport options, which in my opinion kind of suck, but that's okay. So now I'm going to come here in my UV editor and just start selecting faces. And I'm essentially going to grab or sorry, vertices. I'm essentially going to grab all of these guys and, you know, just move them down. I might rotate them ever so slightly. And again, continue to move them inward. And I might actually want to grab, this for there too. Essentially, I want a nice straight line from this vert to that vert. And that's enough editing. I don't want to adjust it too much. But now I want to essentially line this guy up so that edge is nice and flat. I'll grab these vertices and come over here and say line vertically. And so now they're kind of perfect. That's pretty good. I could come in here and do the same thing for these guys. Align vertically. So now when I go to hand paint this, there might be a little bit of distortion, but at least when I'm painting it'll look nice. And I actually probably don't want to do that. I'll move it a little bit, but I really want to minimize the distortion that I'm going to get. Now I'm just going to kind of place this guy, making sure he's not getting too close to the borders for mip mapping. You know, this being my halfway point, I actually might scale this down a bit, but we'll see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yes, I do want to scale this. I'm going to hold control so it scales it evenly. I want to make sure that this is the halfway line. I'd just like to make sure that it's not exceeding it because I'm going to be using a 512 by 1024 map. I'll hit A for angle snap and then rotate this about there and place it down below here. Ideally, again, I'm going to be using a 512 tall by 1024 wide map, so that's why I'm kind of placing it where I'm placing it. From here I'll close it and say collapse all. Yes. From here I'm going to add the symmetry modifier, not spherify but symmetry, again along the Y and flipping it. And now I really want to make sure that this 0.1 threshold is not collapsing any vertices. I don't want it to collapse. If I make it too high, it'll start collapsing vertices upon themselves that I don't want to be welded. But this looks like it's actually doing a stellar job. So from here we're good to go. I'm just going to right click and say collapse all. Yes, okay. Select my my light blade, make it black wireframe, and save my max file. So now the UV space that we unwrapped is going to be the same on this side as it is on this side since we duplicated the unwrapped geometry. So they'll be sharing UV space. So we only have to paint one side of this weapon. The reason I'm doing that is I've actually opened up Bloodseeker's weapon here that came with the model, and this is their texture map that they're using for Bloodseeker. So that's kind of, I'm going to be using the same dimensions. Again, they pulled theirs away a little bit from the edges to accommodate for mip mapping. So that's, I kind of mimic that technique as well. And I'll be also coming into this texture sheet and color picking colors, when I start painting my my diffuse map, coming in here with my brush, hitting Alt, and then I can start selecting some of these basic colors that we're using. That way I'm using the same color scheme that's used in the game. Okay, one final thing I would like to do is go here to File, Import. I'm going to go to my Dota 2 workshop, OBJ files. I'm going to import this high poly OBJ as a single mesh. And what I'd like to do is just make sure before I start baking in the next video tutorial that my low poly lines up perfect with my high poly, which it should be doing since we retopoed it. So here I can just kind of hit F4 to turn off my wireframe, and again I'm just kind of making sure here that we are lined up perfectly. So at this point it might actually make sense to come in here and apply a different material to the different objects so I can actually see what's sticking out and how this is kind of working. Okay, so I've applied the material to my high poly and just making sure that my low poly is the same on both sides. And it is, we're good to go. Okay, so in the next part we're going to go over baking our normal maps, our diffuse maps, and creating some of the other base maps that we're going to use to generate all the textures for the Dota game engine being source. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.